You are in the ladies' room with Dr. Donica, the only public ladies' room you can enter anytime without ever waiting online. I'm your host, Dr. Donica Moore. We'll be having real conversations with real women about really intimate issues. They may be embarrassing, sad, or funny, but they will always be interesting and informative. You know, like the best conversations you've had in ladies' rooms with your best friends, or total strangers and a physician. Please join us. Welcome to the ladies' room. With me here today is my guest, Lesley Jane Seymour, who's best known as the award-winning editor-in-chief for More magazine from 2008 until Meredith Court decided to end my favorite publication 8 years later. And I really loved it for the articles, not just because it was named More and my last name is Moore. But it's easy to think that the editor-in-chief of a major women's magazine sits at her office drinking coffee and bossing everyone around like Miranda Priestly did in The Devil Wears Prada. But Lesley Jane Seymour defies that stereotype, despite having been named the most powerful fashion magazine editor by Forbes. She was the public face of the More magazine brand on every major television news program, and she oversaw all editorial, creative, and brand extensions. The brand extensions were my favorite part, because their events included the wildly popular Reinvention Convention in New York City and the Escape to Miraval with More, where I was privileged to be a speaker at both events, and they were wonderfully energizing. And Miraval was quite relaxing as well. Under Lesley Jane Seymour's 8 years of leadership, she not only advocated for women to reinvent, reimagine, and reinvigorate their lives, but she did the same for More magazine, evolving it from just another women's magazine to a robust thought leader for stylish, involved, highly accomplished women. What I particularly loved were the features about the most powerful women in politics, business, and entertainment, including all the names of all the high-powered women you've ever heard of, from Shonda Rhimes to Gloria Steinem, Hillary Clinton, and many others. But my favorite part, in 2015, More made history when First Lady Michelle Obama guest-edited an entire issue, something that had never been done before, which not only made global waves, but drove more than 8.5 billion impressions. And I admit, I first thought that was a typo.
I know. It's not. Billion is the word.
So under Lesley's leadership, and she's getting all red and embarrassed here by my talking about all her accomplishments, and I haven't even gotten to the awards yet. Under Lesley's leadership, More launched the More Impact Awards, celebrating women of accomplishment, presented by First Lady Michelle Obama and Robin Wright, giving Lesley the best profile picture I have ever seen on LinkedIn. They worked with the Harvard Business School, Microsoft, Duke, and Elevate to develop thought leadership partnerships and events. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Lesley has received numerous awards, but I want to highlight and start off our conversation hearing much more about two of them. One was Personal Service nominee in 2009 for the endangered uterus. And that's going to fit into our topic today because, of course, we're talking about menopause. And the 2014 winner of the National Women Political Caucus Emma Award for A Hidden Cause of Chronic Illness. Lesley Jane Seymour, welcome to the ladies' room.
Thank you. It's great. I feel like we should be in the ladies' room together right now talking.
I told people we were actually in the ladies' room.
I hear the doors slamming, flushing.
Well, we are in a very small room.
Yes, we are.
And it's just the two of us, so
That's
this is
true.
Our version of the ladies' room
Very
for now.
Very good. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me here. It's a lot of fun. And, health was a big part of the magazine business. I mean, I did More, but I also did Mary Claire. I also did Redbook. I also did YM. And for 9 years, believe it or not, I worked for the real Amanda Priestley. And so that, I was just never a fit in that world. And it's such an interesting thing as you get to be yourself. And I know so many women struggle with this. They get into a great place, a place they've always dreamed of being. I started as a copywriter at Vogue. And you think, why don't I fit in here? What's wrong with me? And after 9 years, I finally figured out, I was just a different type of person. I was a much more, engaged kind of person with the consumer. And I was a much more down-to-earth person. And I loved what I was doing. It was the epitome of everything. I could go get a table anywhere. I could get my hair cut anywhere. And
typical New Yorker concerns.
Yeah. And it just, it was not really for me. And amazing that you can sort of reinvent yourself even starting there. And that's when I went over to Glamour and we started doing, I was a beauty editor there, and we did health pieces starting there. And it's always been a big concern. And of course, as you get older, health becomes a much more, prominent issue in your life in general.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I'm very lucky. I'm going to knock on my head right here. I don't have major health issues, but, I look around me and I see all the issues that are out there. And I'm just so glad that you're doing this because it's just really vitally important and that we all talk about them. And a lot of people are afraid to talk about what's going on. And one of the...
I'm not afraid of talking
that's why
about
I'm so
anywhere.
glad.
And we are going to go to all those places that people are afraid about.
I'm glad.
And one of those places is definitely menopause.
Yes.
And when you and I first talked about doing this, what I've really enjoyed is asking the people I've invited to be guests what topic they would like to talk about.
Right.
And I love the fact that your brain just went immediately to menopausal symptoms and how you made the decision to try HRT.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important topic because, of course, 5,000 women a day go through menopause in the United States and Canada. And, of course, the newsrooms used to focus on every baby boomer trend.
Right.
And menopause has become that really hot trend where now hot flashes are news flashes.
Right.
And I also think, obviously, there are more women making editorial decisions to talk about those issues. But I remember the first time hot flashes in menopause was on the cover of Time magazine. And it was like revolutionary that people were talking about. This was something in my mother's generation. They only whispered about the change.
Right.
They didn't actually talk about it.
But I think now what people are not doing is they're not talking about what they're doing about it. And the whole HRT thing, I mean, I really struggled with it. It was, I was totally terrified. And we did so many studies and so much research at Moore. And we did, stories of, I had doctors who wrote their stories about, they read all the research and they decided that their life was just too broken up because of what was happening and they were going to give it a try. And I remember thinking, it's really a very individual decision. And you have to decide where you fall on the curve of what you're going to feel and what you're going to do. And it really was my friend. I did an interview with Tara Ullman, who wrote the book Menopause Confidential, really when I was starting Covey Club, which is my new endeavor.
And I want to hear a lot more about that, and I know our listeners want to hear a lot more about that.
And she was just, what was so interesting is, again, so few women talk about menopause. And I had gotten to her because of the book, and we did a Facebook Live together. And as she talked about it, she wasn't crazy. She has a really good medical degree, and she, has all these statistics, and she's a scientist. And she was talking about how, you don't have to suffer like this. And she looked at my arm because I had a little scrunchie on my hand. And she said, "What's that? Is that like a Live Strong thing?" And I was like, "Of course you wouldn't know because this is what you do every time you get sweaty. You have to take your hair and pop it up and put it on top of your head because you're sweating all the time." And
I didn't let it get that far.
Oh, no, I lived with it for 2 years. I've always been a sort of tough it out kind of person. I've always been, just sort of roll with it and get over it and deal with it. And,
so what were the symptoms that were the most bothersome
so for
you?
me, and it wasn't like I had incredibly debilitating symptoms, but the problem was the night sweats were getting in the way of getting any sleep. I'm a psycho case when I don't get any sleep. So I knew that. And then I also have cluster headaches. And my cluster headaches had transferred from being intermittent. And I've had them my whole life since I was 13. They were intermittent up until menopause. I would get them for maybe 6 weeks. And then they would treat them and they would go away for 2 years and come back. I couldn't get off the meds for since I went through menopause. So I thought, maybe I need to
the meds for the headache.
Yes. And I wanted to see, bringing my body back to where it had been. Was it the menopause that was making these headaches chronic? They're very, very painful. And look, the medication is not horrific. It's it lowers your blood pressure and there's small side effects. If you're going to have something, it's a small thing. But if you don't have to take meds, you don't want to. So, and you want to go back to how it was. And it's a really painful headache. So that was one of the things that motivated me to say, let me see what it could be like. And my other my other thing that was happening, when people call it a brain fog, it's not a brain fog. I felt like it was a vault. Like my brain would just go blank. Like I'm not talking about some little haze around the edges. And so I thought, let me try it. The great part is, you can try it and stop. Nobody's compelling you to go forward.
And when we're talking about it, we're talking about hormone replacement therapy.
HRT.
So I do have to just insert a doctor comment here for the benefit of our listeners. One of my pet peeves is that when we generally talk about HRT, people think we're talking about one drug. When we're talking about HRT, we're talking about a whole category. We're talking about lots of different pills, patches, creams, gels, vaginal rings. We're talking about different combinations of estrogen and progesterone. We're talking about many different types of estrogen and many different types of progesterone. So I just want people to kind of be aware that we're probably talking about a whole class of products, not one specific drug, nor are we endorsing any one specific drug.
Right. And I'm actually now on a generic patch, which I think is fantastic. It worked out very well for me. And one of the other things I noticed is that because of the sweating and the constant sweating, I wasn't touching anybody. And my daughter laid down on me, and she, she's an older kid, and we were in bed, and she was laying on me, and she goes, "Mom, why are you so sweaty? What's going on?"
They're so
and I was
charming.
like, yeah, they tell it like it is. And
I have one of those too.
And I thought, I realized I stopped touching anybody because literally one touch, and I was just a sopping wet mess. And so that's why I tried it. And I'll tell you, I think it brought my life back. It really brought me back. I just feel like a normal human being again. It did not solve my headache problem. It did not. So that was kind of a bummer, but I just feel like myself.
That's
awesome. I'm going to go for it for a little while and see how I feel. And what was interesting is I went back to Tara after a year, and, I said I'm like nervous every day that I'm going to end up with breast cancer. I'm terrified. It's not in my family. It's not out there. Of course, there's cancer in my family in general. And she was really great. She said, it's science. It's not, don't take my word for it. It's the science. And I've read it all. I've read it all 100 times because we wrote about it 100 times. But
and
it's
if,
still
God forbid,
scary.
you get breast cancer, which I think is, I've always wanted some reporter or writer to do a survey of 10,000 women and find out what are the most feared diseases, like get some data.
Breast cancer is terrifying.
I think breast cancer is one of the diseases that women are most feared of. Interestingly, I would also like to see them interview 1,000 women physicians and compare that. Because I think for women physicians, we're much more afraid of ovarian cancer
than
breast cancer. Because what we know about breast cancer, even though it's the second most commonly diagnosed cancer in women, what we know is that 95% of women who are diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, and I don't want to be one of them, but 95% of them are effectively cured.
Right.
To the point where insurance companies no longer consider that a pre-existing condition if you had stage 1 breast cancer.
Okay.
So, although now with the new healthcare bill, having had a C-section is a pre-existing condition, so go figure. But anyway, I think the way most doctors feel is if you're somebody who is getting your regular mammograms,
you want me to get that? Here,
please turn off your cell phones before all interviews and when you talk to people on a sound studio. Thank you. That was my young adult daughter texting in. Anyway, what was I saying? Now I'm all distracted. Which is, I have no excuse because I also went through menopause and also had the brain fog situation.
Did you?
Oh, that was the worst for me. I just
so
couldn't
what did
remember.
you do? Did you do the patch?
No,
you did.
I did not. I take a pill.
Oh, you took a pill.
Interesting. I love pills.
You do?
I do love pills.
I hate pills.
The
patch is so much easier. Interesting.
Yeah, and this is what's so great, that we have all these different choices in our little black bag. And what I love anytime there's a new medicine introduced is it just gives us more choices for more people. Because the dirty little secret is, for a long time, people wanted to make some kind of consensus agreement that there was one form of treatment or one decision that was going to be right for all women going through menopause.
Right.
And the fact is, there is nothing I can think of in medicine that applies to 100% of the people or 100% of the people in a demographic, like women, 100% of the time, except nobody should smoke.
Right.
Everything else, there's wide variety. There are exceptions. there are different doses for different people. There are different regimens for different people. There are different recommendations for different people. And I think there was at one point where it almost seemed like the medical community wanted to put HRT in the drinking water.
Wow.
And actually, it's been detected in the drinking water in some places because there's so many people
getting into the water?
In the urine.
Oh, my God.
Getting into the water. So,
well, can I tell you of something funny?
Of course. I love funny stuff.
When I took over more, I'm a very consumer-oriented editor. I always listen to what the consumer has to say. And so my biggest excitement is when I put a magazine out there and we would hear back, immediately once the internet was going. And you'd hear back, I love this, I love that. I didn't like that, but I love this. What's so interesting is like the teenagers when I did YM, they, you put Leo DiCaprio on the cover and they're ecstatic and it's selling and they're sending you all these love notes, all that stuff. And so I get to more. And I wait. I mean, like the kid, waiting for Santa. I want to know what the consumer thought. And for the first 2 weeks of my first 3 issues, I got these mean letters. And I thought, I'm going to fail. This is horrible. They didn't like this. They didn't like that. They didn't like the color of this. They didn't like the color of that. People were criticizing the font. You got to remember,
women are so critical.
More was a really intelligent, outspoken group of women, right?
I was one of your readers.
But what was interesting
I hope I never sent you hate mail.
No, I realized after 2 weeks, we would start getting the nice letters. Mm-hmm. And we got to the point where we would be in research meetings and I would say, can we embed estrogen into the cover so that when they're opening the magazine, they're feeling much more nice towards me because this is really, really annoying. It was just a different way. We would get the same letters. It's just the mean letters came first. Isn't that funny?
I once did a lecture tour with Patti LaBelle for about a year, and we went across the country and talked about menopause, her experience as a patient, my experience as a doctor. And when I asked her what her most bothersome symptom was, she had this great response. She said, it made me feel witchy with a capital B.
With a capital B. That's cute.
I loved that.
And I was really excited about menopause because I was on the last end of it. I didn't go through until I was 57. And so I was really at the point with my OBGYN where I said to him, if this goes on any longer, I'm going to make you go in there and turn it off. Because why is this continuing? This is useless. Stop it. I don't want my period anymore.
Did you have heavier periods as you were getting closer and closer to menopause?
Totally grossness where I literally felt like I was 16 again. And, if I had to do an international flight, I had to I never wore pads. I had to wear pads if you took a sleeping pill and went to sleep. And you would come whenever you didn't know it was going to come. It was just like being a 16-year-old.
Yeah, well, I've often said that perimenopause, which I've described as menopause's evil younger sister, is like adolescence in reverse.
Oh, totally.
And
absolutely.
we all remember how fun that was the first
Oh, my God. No, it was awful. So I was thrilled to get here. And then really I had no hot flashes getting up to it. And then it was both the hot flashes and the brain fog and the lack of sleep that just threw me.
So interestingly, hot flashes are the most famous menopausal symptoms and the ones that get the most attention. The most bothersome symptom to men about menopause are the mood swings.
Yeah.
And in survey after survey, the number one most bothersome menopausal symptom to women is the sleep deprivation.
Oh, it's just
And many
awful.
women don't even know that is associated with not only the night sweats, and night sweats, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of going through menopause yet, or for the 30% of women who sail through menopause without any bothersome symptoms.
God bless those ladies.
But what night sweats is not, honey, it's warm in here. It's, I'm getting up and I'm changing the sheets and I'm changing the bedclothes and now I can't fall back asleep.
That you're getting soaking wet and then you're freezing cold and then you are literally woken up so many times that you're just
and then
up
you can't
down.
function.
Right.
And it actually is a serious health risk because the number one health risk of sleep deprivation is being in a motor vehicle accident when you're driving.
Interesting.
If you're driving while sleep deprived, you are as impaired as though you had, 2 alcoholic beverages, depending on how sleep deprived you are. And then my other pet peeve is a lot of people, when they're sleep deprived, take over-the-counter sleep aids, which the active ingredient is basically Benadryl.
Oh, right.
And that has a very long half-life, and in many
and
women,
you don't realize
they have
you're groggy.
a hangover effect. So, all of these things are all connected. There are so many menopausal symptoms that so many people don't realize are associated with menopause. We've talked about most of the most common ones, but the fifth most common menopausal symptom that actually affects 50% of all menopausal women, whether or not they have other menopausal symptoms, is vaginal dryness.
Oh, yes.
And that's the one most people really don't want to talk about.
It's totally a drag. All gone with HRT.
And I think that was a big factor for me.
Oh, yeah. It's a terrible drag. Yeah. And it's, that is really totally, absolutely a bummer. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I wanted to come talk here is because what really bothers me is everybody's doing it and no one's talking about it.
Well, and
why are we ashamed to talk about it? This judgmental thing. We were talking about that. What I was saying to you, there's a segment of women who, believe that you should do all this stuff all natural. Mm-hmm. You should never take anything. I mean, I go, and I get into the whole beauty aspect of this. There's just a group who believe, and I basically say to those people, well, have you ever shaved your legs? Do you use deodorant? Then you're not natural, okay? So, and that sort of thread goes all the way back to those ladies who wanted us to, have childbirth naturally and without any painkillers. So I think that, today you've got to do what you've got to do, but why are we still ashamed to speak about it? Mm-hmm. And even among my friends, I'm shocked. Like, months later, they're like, oh, yeah, I've been on that. It's like, why aren't you talking to me about it? Why didn't you tell me? Mm-hmm. Because I felt all alone when I had to make this decision, and I felt like I was making some dirty, awful decision.
Which is amazing because until the Women's Health Initiative came out in 2001, which was the largest clinical trial of ever in history, certainly in a women's health arena. And of course, that showed that there was a slight increase in the risk of breast cancer, also heart attacks and strokes in the group that was taking the combined estrogen and progesterone. Interestingly, in the estrogen alone group, they didn't have those numbers. But women went off HRT in droves after that study came out.
And then they found a lot of that a lot of the reporting was not correct on that.
Well, and also there were a lot of glitches in the study design.
Right.
So, for example, the average age of women who entered the study was 63.
Right.
So many of them had been in menopause for many years, which is presumably very different than if somebody starts HRT when they're first going into menopause. But the point I wanted to make is until that study came out, HRT, one particular type of HRT, one particular brand, was the number one selling drug in the United States, which was
number one
amazing,
selling? I did not know
given that it was only available to women.
But that drug is gone, isn't it?
No, it's still on the market. It's still available.
Oh.
And it's still very good for some people.
Huh.
The good news is we have lots of different choices for lots of different people depending on what their needs are and their issues. I mean, just between the two of us, you said I like patches, I said I like pills.
Right.
And that's just personal preference. There are some medical reasons that the patch would have an advantage over the pill. But in my case, my personal preference to take a pill rather than using a patch.
You're going to do it. Yeah.
Overwhelmed, the downsides of those other issues. And I didn't have risks where I had to be concerned about, the differences between pills and patches. And we all take the information and we make our decisions, sometimes based on something as simple as I would rather take a pill than have a patch.
Right.
And sometimes based on some very complicated medical history, where people might have other risk factors. You mentioned earlier about breast cancer and saying you didn't have any risk factors. 80% of women who've gotten breast cancer have no other risk factors other than being female.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I feel we are anyway. I have to say that I kind of feel like, knock on wood, I have those dense breasts anyway, and so they're always poking around in there and biopsying and everything. It's so, it's like, okay, can I have a better quality of life while they're doing that, or a crappy, quality
and just
of life?
remember to get your mammograms on a regular basis. As far as dense breasts, they're a lot more common than people think. 40% of women have dense breasts.
Oh, interesting.
Back to the issue about HRT and breast cancer, it does increase your risk of breast cancer slightly. But what I want to...
By 1 or 2%, my radiologist said?
Even smaller than that.
It's smaller than that. Okay.
But what I want to assure women is the overwhelming majority of women who have had breast cancer never took any kind of estrogen.
Right.
So how are they getting breast cancer?
Right.
The other thing that was interesting, even in the Women's Health Initiative data, is that even the women who developed breast cancer, who had been on HRT, they lived longer. So we didn't really know what to make of that. Either those were such early breast cancers, and presumably the women in the study were obviously getting their mammograms.
Right.
And I think that's the main take-home message, whether you're on HRT or not.
Right.
Get your mammograms according to the schedule that your doctor recommends for you, because that's still the best screening test we have for breast cancer, even for women with dense breasts. And I can assure you, I can't announce this yet, but there are technologies in development that will really enhance the way women with dense breasts can be evaluated for breast cancer.
Oh, do call me when that happens. I am so tired of being the dense breast girl.
Yeah, but technology moves. Technology development moves quickly. Right. Getting technology FDA approved,
I see,
does not necessarily move so quickly, and for very good reasons.
Interesting.
There are very good reasons for that. But I loved what you said about this concept of making the decision to go on HRT being very similar to that feeling that you had with deciding to use an epidural or not.
Oh, yeah. There is a whole sort of shaming kind of thing that's going on right now. And I just think we have to move beyond that. And I think we have to let women make their own decisions. And I was surprised that I felt ashamed that I was going to choose this. I mean, I was scared and
Did you
ashamed
feel
at
like,
the same time.
Why do you think you were ashamed? Did you think you were wimping out, or you were letting down the natural holistic movement?
Both. And also that, if something goes wrong with me, it's going to be my own fault. And that is, there's a terrible sort of hangover of, you're creating your own destiny. But as you say, 80% of breast cancers come from nowhere anyway. So
and presumably you will continue to get your mammograms on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah.
And presumably you will be, God forbid you get breast cancer, you'll be diagnosed early.
Right.
And you will be treated immediately and effectively. And we're no longer doing radical shotgun therapy for women with early breast cancers. And you will deal with it the same way you deal with everything else. And I know it's very easy for me to say because I have not had breast cancer.
Right.
I have not had any kind of cancer, but I have gone through the same decision-making process that you have regarding HRT. In my case, I guess I always assumed I would take it. And I also went through menopause on the late side.
Oh,
I was 56.
Okay.
55 and a half. And of course, you're not in menopause officially until you haven't had a period for a year. So I did think about it, during that time. But for me, the deciding factor was the sleep disturbances.
Yeah.
I couldn't function. And the brain fog, I think, comes from the sleep disturbances.
Oh, really?
I thought that's just my theory.
Oh, I heard
other
it was synapses. Okay.
There's many other theories. That's just my personal theory. It would be impossible to do a study where you could separate out women who had night sweats and no sleep disturbances with women who had night sweats and sleep disturbances.
Right.
It's sort of like in the postpartum period when they talk about postpartum depression.
Right.
I think sleep deprivation is a huge factor.
I'm sure.
And to study that, where would you find postpartum women to study who are not sleep deprived?
Right, exactly.
We can't do that study. I also confessed to you when we were talking about this earlier with respect to, being like making the decision to have pain medication in labor and delivery. I had general anesthesia. So
that's right. You one-upped me. I just had the epidural.
I do not believe that you get any extra points for suffering in this world.
No.
And so that was, for me, the decision was very easy with the HRT. It was interfering with my quality of life. And I just felt like my gas tank was empty.
Right.
I just felt completely empty.
I think the interesting thing you just said is you don't get any points for putting up with, terrible pain or terrible things health-wise.
And
but we
I
do tend to think we will.
Yeah, absolutely. I could go on and on and on talking to you all day about this. We do have to wrap up. But the last thing I want to say about this concept of what's natural.
Oh,
what
God,
I always tell people
this.
is that natural is a marketing term. It is not a medical term. There are only two things that I can think about in medicine, in all of medicine, where we use the word natural. One is natural childbirth, and the other is natural causes of death.
Oh, interesting.
And I was thinking about that concept, and, it's really, it doesn't matter. Disease is natural. Pestilence is natural. Hurricanes and tsunamis are natural.
Right.
Natural doesn't mean better.
Right. Why we have attached ourselves, or some groups of us have, to this idea. I think it's just honestly, I just think it's a way of, maybe it's a way of seeing things, making life very simple and an easy way to look at things. For some people, they find it simple. Just it gets rid of a lot of noise, right? But it does tend to shame other people, and it does tend to make other people feel bad about their choices.
Right. And is that making us feel better about ourselves because we're making other people feel bad? And what are we in seventh grade?
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of that. And it really comes in many times when I was writing the editor's letter at More. I had to talk about this whole issue when it comes to beauty, because so many people were pushing this idea that you have to age completely naturally. And it was like, why can't everybody make their own decision?
Absolutely.
You have a facelift, I don't. You have injections, she doesn't. I want to have all injections, my girlfriend doesn't want. Why are we judging each other?
You don't need to make one decision for the rest of your life.
But why do we judge each other? And I think getting out of the judging business for women, especially today, is a really important thing. And I think that comes with health. I think it comes with beauty. I think it comes with aging. How you want to approach it. And, and that's one of the things I'm trying to do with Covey is make
And I want you to tell us about what
people
that
feel
was my
good
next
about
question.
themselves. And, so Covey
What is
Club,
Covey Club?
Covey Club is a club that I created because the More readership came to me when the magazine closed, and they were bereft. They were really disappointed. There was no problem with the readership of More. The readership was very strong. The problem was the crumbling advertising market. So I literally spent the last year and a half trying to figure out what I could create that is not More. I can't create More. I had 34 people working for me and a multi-million-dollar budget. This is me, Lesley Jane Seymour herself, trying to create something that is reader-supported, because there are not that many advertisers, A, out there to start with. B, there are almost no advertisers who can support any kind of project today if you are over 40. And I know this sounds crazy, but I battled it.
Because we're the ones with the money.
I battled it for 8 years, Donica. I thought I could fight this city hall. We have more money, more spending power than any other group out there. But the ageism is so thick out there that I literally had a top designer who I love dearly say to me, this is during 2008 when the recession hit. He said, Lesley said, the only people keeping my stores alive today are women over 40, and I can't advertise to them because they were afraid that the 20-year-olds wouldn't go in there. What they fundamentally did not understand is the relationship between 20-year-olds and 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds today, which is totally different. But it's totally different. We share everything. I learn from my daughter. I learn, and she learns from me. We share absolutely everything. So anyway, Covey is the idea. It is an online, offline platform. There are everything. There's a digizine, which is monthly. There is a daily blog where we're going to talk about, it's all the same content that we used to do at More. But now I can make it come alive. What's really exciting is I have this thing called Coffee and Conversation, which really is taken from all the pictures that the readers posted of the coffee cup with the magazine. And they were crying, saying, why is this going away? And so I took that feeling. I want that feeling to be, and Covey is a small group of birds, so I want it to be small. I want it to be anti what's happening with
intimate.
with these big women's conferences. This is a place where lifelong learners like you and me, because I'm a lifelong learner, and that's kind of what separates this group out, can get together and can continue to learn, reinvent, and work on themselves and make this part of their lives the best time of their lives. Because I am really happier than I've ever been. And there's nobody out there talking to or supporting women 40 plus. And so that's what the club is about. There's a very top of the pyramid that is going to be a private networking kind of thing, which is for women who want to get things done, who want to, who are entrepreneurs or managers and want to have a private off the what do you want to call it?
Off the grid.
Off the grid kind of discussion about things that they can't talk to their friends about or can't talk to their communities about. And I'm just really excited. I'm launching February 1st. So I'm hoping that all my former readers and then any other women are going to come and join us. And we're going to be having these wonderful, the little webinars, which are the coffee and conversation things I'm bringing in. You're going to be one of them. We're going to bring in the experts and we're going to talk about various topics. Many of them are the same cover lines that we used to run at More because no one's discussing these. And it's everything from, I'm ready to go and my guy's sitting on the couch. What's with that? What's happening there? Well, how do you find clothes that make you look fabulous and wonderful and trendy, but don't make you look like you're trying too hard? What are you going to do about anti-aging beauty? What things should you do or not do? What's happening to your body? We're going to be talking about menopause. We're going to be talking about
sign
health.
me up. This
so
sounds
anyway,
wonderful. And where do people go to get more information about it?
They go to coveyklubb.com, which is COVEY, and then club.com. And we'll be live February 1st.
Awesome. I'm so excited and I can't wait. So we have to say goodbye, unfortunately, but I just want to leave you with one question we ask everybody at the end of this interview. This is going to be a doozy, especially since you have a young adult daughter. But if you had one piece of health or wellness advice to give to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Wow. Health advice. I was always very lucky to be pretty healthy and I kind of ignored it. So, the one thing I did do right, I was really not a sports person at all growing up. I was small. I was afraid of being on teams, and teams were everything when I was growing up. So really when I came to New York, and that was 1978, they were just starting the club scene and exercise, and I found exercise. And I've stayed with it the whole time, and I am so glad because I am like it is my release.
That's awesome.
And it has stayed with me my whole life. And what's interesting about talking about daughters is how our children are going to grow up with exercise. I mean, my mother didn't sweat a day in her life. And maybe at menopause, but not through her own efforts. And it's such a wonderful thing that we have introduced. And I think to see the next generation, it is literally just it's like brushing your teeth. They do it every day. And I think that is the most wonderful thing that we can give them and that we gave ourselves. And and for anybody who's listening who hasn't done anything, it's never too late. You can start at 40, 50, 60, get up off that couch and pick something you're interested in and start.
I often say being sedentary is the new smoking.
They are saying that. I have heard that. They're saying sitting is the new smoking.
Anyway, I hate to wrap this up, but Lesley Jane Seymour, it has been a pleasure hanging out with you in the ladies' room.
In the ladies' room. Okay.
That's all we have time for today. But let's keep the conversation going on Twitter or Facebook at Dr. Donica. And please join us next week for another episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Real conversations with real women about really intimate topics.